Hello, this is Mark Grier, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 18th issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, first article for today. Fact-checking Trump's primetime address on the economy. The president cited misleading statistics to insist, wrongly, that prices were coming down. President Trump praised what he portrayed as economic gains under his administration in an address from the White House on Wednesday, even as consumers expressed concerns about affordability and voiced discontent over how he has handled the economy. I am bringing these prices down and bringing them down very fast. Let's look at the facts, Mr. Trump said, before ticking off a litany of misleading claims. Here's a look at those facts. What he said: when I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years, and some would say in the history of our country. Well, that's false. Inflation had already fallen to 3% in January when Mr. Trump took office. Inflation did reach a four-decade high in the summer of 2022 at about 9.1% that June, but had declined since then. That number was also not a record. Inflation reached higher points in the 1910s, 1970s, and 1980s. Another what he said last night: the price of a Thanksgiving turkey was down 33% compared to the Biden last year. The price of eggs is down 82% since March, and everything else is falling rapidly, and it's not done yet. Well, this is an exaggeration. Mr. Trump may have been referring to and overstating a report from the American Farm Bureau, which estimated that the cost of a turkey at the grocery store before Thanksgiving had declined by 16% this year from last year. But wholesale turkey prices had actually risen this year, according to data from the Agriculture Department and a Purdue University report. This is likely because turkeys are known as loss leaders, or items that retailers may sell at a loss to entice consumers to the store. On eggs, Mr. Trump is correct that the wholesale price of eggs had fallen from more than $8 a dozen in late February to $1.45 last week, a decline of more than 80%. The retail price of eggs declined less sharply, about 44%, from March to September, which was the last month with the most recent data available. Mr. Trump was also wrong that everything else is falling rapidly. In fact, the Consumer Price Index rose by 3% in September. And another, what he said last night: gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon into much of the country. In some states, it, by the way, just hit $1.99 a gallon. This is an exaggeration. Nationally, gas prices averaged $2.90 per gallon in the week ending December 15th, according to the Energy Information Administration, a government statistical agency. Estimates from non-government trackers like GasBuddy and AAA were similar. It is possible that specific gas stations have prices as low as Mr. Trump heralded, but according to the AAA, just 4 states had average gas prices below $2.50 on Wednesday, with Oklahoma reporting the lowest average price at $2.34 a gallon. There were no states with average gas prices below $2. What he said: already, I've secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States. Well, that is false. Mr. Trump's $18 trillion is almost double what his own White House press office has tallied, $9.6 trillion. It also includes broad pledges and previously announced projects, and more than half of that amount comes from informal pledges from foreign countries to invest in the United States that experts warn may be unrealistic. For example, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates Each pledged more than $1 trillion in investments, which is more than their gross domestic products. Previous pledges in Mr. Trump's first term may also show the amorous nature of such promises. A 2017 pledge from Saudi Arabia to buy $450 billion of American products did not fully materialize. And the next, what he said from last night, we wrapped 12 different bills up into one big, beautiful bill that includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. Well, this is an exaggeration. Mr. Trump's signature domestic policy law, which he signed over the summer, creates deductions for tips and overtime, but those breaks are temporary, and its tax reductions for Social Security benefits are even more limited. The law allows workers to deduct tips and overtime pay from the 2025 and 2026 tax years. The deductions are capped at $25,000 and $12,500 and decrease for individuals making more than $150,000 a year. It also creates a deduction of $6,000 for seniors, phasing out for higher incomes and expiring in 2028. This is not quite eliminating all taxation on benefits. An analysis from the Council of Economic Advisors, an executive branch agency, estimated that under the $6,000 deduction, 88% of Social Security beneficiaries over 65 would pay no taxes on their benefits. This is an increase from the 64% who previously paid no taxes, according to the same report, but still omits 12%, or more than 7 million seniors over 65. Additionally, Social Security beneficiaries under 65, millions of disabled people, young survivors, and early retirees do not qualify for the deduction. Okay, next article. How affordability became a new magic word for politicians. You know exactly how Democrats feel about affordability right now because they will not stop telling you. It's the story of this moment, per Raphael Warnock, and definitively and divisive issue from Hakeem Jeffries, and the central reason to be a Democrat by Elizabeth Warren. A database tracking newsletters from members of Congress shows the party's use of the word approaching talismanic levels of repetition, nearly tripling in the months leading up to a very successful election day. You can also tell how Donald Trump feels about this. He won the presidency with promises to lower prices and make America affordable again, and greeted Election Day by posting that if affordability is your issue, vote Republican. After the races were called, though, he started talking about the concept as if halfway through a tumultuous breakup. Sometimes he tried to win it back, calling himself the affordability president and Republicans the party of affordability. Sometimes he contemplated his rivals. You know, they have this new word called affordability, and we don't talk about it enough. But mostly, he's been irritated, snapping that I don't want to hear about the affordability, posting that the issue was dead, stop lying, calling it a con job created by the Democrats. They just say the word, he complained. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. Can you be against affordability? As with crime, it's tough to stake out contrary positions. The word's too modest and commonsensical, redolent of an era when political ads depicted median suburbanites at kitchen tables frowning over checkbooks. Trump is right to call it new, though. A phrase like affordable housing would not have made subordinates think hopefully about their own mortgages. It would have made them picture low income units renting their property values. Affordability was about somebody else's problems. Advertising recognized this. For decades, it deployed affordable with care like value or budget. The word could easily suggest that a product was bare bones or second rate, better suited to somebody poorer than you. It wasn't until the 1990s that marketers found a way to invert that dollar store era with concepts like affordable luxury, high end brands selling a few mid price items, letting consumers feel like they're accessing goods of somebody richer. Policy making has its own way of reframing things. With housing affordable, started off as a pleasant substitute for low rent or public, but it still pointed squarely at someone else's struggles. That changed as public housing policy shifted its focus towards private markets. As with the National Affordable Housing Act and later George W. Bush's Ownership Society pushed to increase home buying, with its frequent talk of single family home affordability. The research that informed the Affordable Care Act pointed down a related path. Language about universal coverage, it found, made people picture government bureaucracy and expensive handouts to the underserving. Guaranteed affordable choice suggested coverage being purchased, now at a reasonable price. With housing and healthcare, of course, costs had risen enough to trouble even the middle class. In every other realm, Americans did not talk about affordability. We talked about the economy, a vast network of phenomena we assumed would, if dutifully appraised and ministered to, would provide us with jobs and homes and good deals on groceries. Today's voters, by contrast, seem hyper aware that the economy can thrive even as their own lives worsen, a gap that affordability easily steps into. G. Elliott Morris, a data journalist who does polling research, told me that he sees fewer and fewer Americans echoing concerns about broad economic issues like growth and jobs. They talk about their specific experiences of affordability, prices, and the cost of living. A politician can promise, as Trump does, that prices will fall, but overall, prices do not really do that, outside of a painful deflationary episode. The fix for inflation, generally, is that wages rise and we adjust to new baseline costs. The inflationary spike of 2022 had ended by 2024, with wages rising to compensate for it. But as Joe Biden saw then, and Trump is seeing now, it is extremely hard to convince Americans that their honor over a nominal price of milk is some kind of misapprehension. Even if you are right, it is the kind of being right that makes people want to hit you. If voters' understanding of the affordability crisis is, as the writer Matthew Yeglis put it, basically just anger at inflation, then winning elections over it is something of a curse. So long as prices still feel abnormal, you will just be punished next. And yet, the current appeal of affordability seems to stretch well beyond that. Zohran Mamdani's affordability obsessed campaign, for instance, was generally not about everyday prices. It was about the overachieving class composition of New York City and the feasibility of living here in the first place. For many, the word seems to capture this kind of broad, long simmering frustration about the basic possibilities of life, not just the inflated cost of groceries or even housing or healthcare, but also education, childcare, energy, and 2 dozens of other things that once felt like staples of a modestly nice American existence, and now vex even those with decent incomes. Affordable, for the moment, has ceased to point toward somebody else's problems. It clearly sounds to a lot of voters as though it's pointing at their own. Okay, let's move on to the next article. Dan Bongino says he will step down from FBI in January. The departure of Mr. Bongino had seemed inevitable since August, when the White House hired Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey to share his job as deputy director. Dan Bongino, the number 2 official at the FBI, said on Wednesday that he would step down next month, bringing an end to his brief but tumultuous stint at the Bureau, where he was known for his volcanic temper, missteps, and hyperactive presence on social media. I will be leaving my position with the FBI in January, Mr. Bongino wrote on social media shortly after President Trump appeared to confirm earlier news reports that Mr. Bongino planned to step down. Mr. Bongino, a Trump political ally with no prior experience at the FBI, at times struggled with the immense demands of a job that required running the day-to-day operations of the Bureau, particularly his awkward efforts to square a previous embrace of conspiracy theories with FBI investigations that debunked them. Mr. Bongino, 51, had suggested he would announce his departure on Friday, but accelerated his plans after Mr. Trump addressed his status, according to a person with knowledge of the situation. Mr. Bongino, a Long Island native, was one of several political appointees, including Kash Patel, the FBI director, installed into senior positions at the Bureau, a first in the agency's history. He served less than a year in a post reasonable for overseeing for overseeing dozens of field offices around the country and world, one typically occupied by a veteran FBI agent. He has struggled he has suggested he would return to his previous job as a pro-Trump podcaster and social media personality. The upheaval comes at a precarious moment for the Bureau and the White House. Mr. Trump and his appointees see the FBI, which long operated independently of White House interference, as a critical part of his retribution agenda. He is leaving on what he believes to be a high note, but it involves a case: the capture of a man accused of planting pipe bombs at Republican and Democratic headquarters on the eve of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. That also illustrated a dizzying disconnect between his promotion of conspiracy theories and the realities imposed by real world FBI investigations. After the arrest earlier this month, Mr. Bongino appeared on Sean Hannity's Fox News show, where the host asked him to explain his previous claim that the case was an inside job, abetted by a federal cover up. I was paid in the past, Sean, for my opinions. That's clear. And one day I will be back in that space. But that's not what I'm paid for now, Mr. Bongino had said. He added, I'm paid to be your deputy director, and we base investigations on facts. The willingness of Mr. Patel and Mr. Bongino to execute White House personnel directives, including firings and forced transfers without cause, alienated many current and former Bureau officials who have accused the pair of sacrificing the well being of agents to preserve their place in the Trump pecking order. The Trump administration has purged the Bureau's ranks of supervisors who have resisted efforts to fire agents involved in the investigations related to Mr. Trump and the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Mr. Patel has upended norms by authorizing polygraph tests to determine if his subordinates had said unflattering things about him. Mr. Bongino's obsession with his own image, as projected through a constant stream of gung ho social media posts, landed flat in a proud law enforcement agency where working hard and keeping a low profile has been a calling card of leadership. In a lawsuit filed in September, the former head of the Bureau's powerful Washington field office, Stephen Jensen, said he was taken aback by the intense focus that Mr. Bongino devoted to increasing online engagement through his social media profiles in an effort to change his followers' perception of the FBI. Mr. Jensen worried that Mr. Bongino spent more time on creating content for his social media pages than on FBI investigations. Mr. Bongino departure seemed inevitable after the White House in August hired the Missouri Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, to share his job as deputy director. It was an unusual arrangement at the Bureau for a job that has never been shared nor held by someone other than a veteran FBI agent. Mr. Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, fell out of favor after lambasting Attorney General Pam Bondi over her handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case and alienating Mr. Bondi's friend, Miss Bondi's friend and ally, Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff. Mr. Bongino's departure represents a tempered victory for Ms. Bondi, who accused him in a contentious meeting over the summer of planting negative stories about her in the right wing news media, after the Justice Department issued a memo stating that the Epstein files warranted no further investigation. Mr. Bongino, apparently upset by that exchange, did not show up for work the next day. After Mr. Bongino was appointed, he told FBI employees that he would not act as a partisan political figure, but he was installed at the FBI by a president who demands loyalty above all else, making his promise seem far-fetched. Former and current agents said that Mr. Bongino failed to put his personnel politics aside as he promised and pushed right-wing rhetoric with his comments on social media. Even in a reduced role with less direct supervision of senior agents, he lacked the sophistication and depth of knowledge to oversee complex investigations, the agents had said. Mr. Bongino once complained that it was hard work running the country's largest and most important law enforcement agency and lamented having to look at four walls every day, an office, while being away from his family. What the move means for the FBI under Mr. Patel, who has drawn criticism over his lavish spending on government funded travel and his use of FBI SWAT teams to protect his girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins, is unclear. Mr. Patel has recently told associates he plans to stay on at least through the 2026 midterm elections, but has acknowledged that the president could change his mind at any time. One factor, perhaps, in working in Mr. Patel's favor, Mr. Trump's top domestic policy advisor, Stephen Miller, considers Mr. Patel to be a compliant purveyor of his directives on personnel and policy matters. The surprising announcement that Mr. Bailey had been tapped to be co-deputy director of the FBI was regarded by Justice Department and Bureau officials as a clear vote of no confidence in Mr. Bongino and to an extent Mr. Patel. Mr. Bailey, who has a good relationship with Ms. Bondi and Ms. Wiles, is regarded as a more conventional choice for the job, with experience overseeing a major law enforcement agency. But like Mr. Bongino, he lacks the status of having moved up through the ranks of the Bureau, long a prerequisite for the job. Late last year, Mr. Trump interviewed Mr. Bailey for the FBI director's job, but was unimpressed and opted for Mr. Patel, who once wrote a children's book portraying him as a king. Some officials expressed astonishment that Mr. Bongino, who had promoted conspiracy theories about Mr. Epstein, the disgraced financier, before swatting them down in his official role, lasted this long. At the FBI, he pined for his well paid days as a podcaster and seemed eager to maintain good standing among the right wing influencers who cheered on his appointment. Mr. Bongino took public responsibility for the Epstein investigation, diverting dozens of agents to examine documents and video despite previous investigations, and had concluded there was no foul play in Mr. Epstein's death. The findings disputed the baseless contention echoed by Mr. Bongino and Mr. Patel before they joined the FBI that the government had suppressed a list of Mr. Epstein's sex trafficking clients. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, next article. Shock and sadness hang over the Reiners neighborhood. Neighbors said a pal had fallen over the wealthy Los Angeles area where Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found stabbed to death. The atmosphere in the neighborhood around the Reiners' home in Brentwood on Wednesday was somber. Christmas ornaments swung gently from the boughs of an enormous evergreen just behind the house's main gate. Several small bouquets of flowers, 2 candles, and a small box of white hydrangeas had been left by well-wishers below Christmas wreaths decorating the gates, next to newly added no trespassing signs. 2 private security guards stood watch in front of them. Ken Nolan, a screenwriter who had worked on a film with Mr. Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner in 2018, stopped to lay flowers at the gates. "It's really horrible," Mr. Nolan said, getting choked up. "It's a Greek tragedy." Mr. Nolan recalled the Reiners' warmth and generosity. He said Michelle Reiner had a funny, acerbic personality and was also incredibly kind. I was just tiny I was just a tiny sliver of their lives, and they touched so many people, he said. Neighbors, out for exercise or to walk dogs, passed by quietly. No one agreed to give their names to a reporter, but over the 3 days since the Reiners were found stabbed to death in their bedroom and their younger son was arrested, several neighbors spoke of a pervasive sadness hanging over the community, mixed with a sense of shock and horror. Homes here are surrounded by hedges, gates, cameras, and security systems that include round-the-clock patrols. For many residents, they thought that a deadly threat might come from inside. One's own family was sobering. The couple's younger son, Nick Reiner, 32, who has spoken publicly about his struggles with addiction, has been charged with 2 counts of murder. Neighbors recalled the Reiners as polite, respectful people, though they kept to themselves and few could say they knew them well. Still, the events of the last few days, some neighbors said, had brought home the idea that this sort of tragedy could happen in any family. Libby Motika, who grew up in the neighborhood in the 1950s and lives about 6 blocks from the Reiners' home, said an influx of famous people in recent decades had changed the place's sense of community, turning what had been an upper middle class neighborhood into a wealthy enclave where no one normal lives anymore. Rob and Michelle Reiner were private, but not aloof, neighbors said. John Fawcett, who owns the Sinclair gas station a few blocks from the Reiners' home and makes it a practice to address all of his customers by name, said the Reiners were friendly, engaging people who came to the station frequently. They were great. It's so sad, he said. In a related story, here's another article. For families fighting addiction, Reiner tragedy strikes a nerve. Nick Reiner, charged with murdering his parents, Rob and Michelle Singer Reiner, spent much of his life battling drug addiction, an affliction that millions of Americans face. He went to drug treatment 18 times as a teenager. He had a heart attack on a plane after doing cocaine. He tormented his family with violent outbursts, stints living on the streets, and a never ending cycle of relapse. Nick Reiner, 32, struggled with drug addiction for nearly 2 decades, something he and his family shared with the public. This week, he was charged with murder in the death of his parents, the director, Rob Reiner, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner. His ordeal and its impact on his parents and family has resonated with millions of people, including Patty Vargas. Her daughter isolated herself and lived on the streets while battling addiction to alcohol and drugs. Her son developed a heart condition from drug use and died of heart failure in 2017 while intoxicated, just 1 month shy of turning 36. As a parent, I would have cut off both arms to save my kids, said Ms. Vargas of Vacaville, California. She took out a second mortgage and eventually lost her home covering treatment costs, she said. This is a health crisis. It's not a moral failing. It's not a family screw up. It's an illness. Some 50 million Americans struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. It can require multiple stints in rehab before people truly begin the recovery process, according to experts. Others may never reach that point. Drug overdose is the leading cause of death for Americans between 18 and 45 years old. It's really hard to know whether or not someone is going to recover, said Colleen Berryessa, a Rutgers University professor who studies addiction. Though rare, drug use and related mental health disorders can sometimes lead to violent and deadly actions, usually while a person is under the influence of some type of drug or trying to obtain them. In 2021, a man whose family said he was addicted to opioids and grew angry when doctors wouldn't prescribe them was sentenced to life in prison for a deadly shooting at a Minnesota health clinic. Prosecutors in the Reiners killings have not indicated whether they believe substance use played a role in the murders, and no information about Nick's mental health history has emerged. As the celebrity son of a prominent Hollywood filmmaker, Nick Reiner and his family had access to the highest end resources to treat his addiction. But sometimes money and resources aren't enough, said Gary Mendel, a hotel executive whose son, Brian, killed himself in 2011. His son was 25 and had struggled with addiction for over a decade, said Mr. Mendel, who lives in Westport, Connecticut. Mr. Mendel founded Shatterproof, an addiction crisis nonprofit, after his son's death. I had all the resources that anyone could have, he said. I could afford anything related to the treatment of my son. But shame and stigma still drove Brian to die by suicide, he said. The Reiners, who struggled with how to treat Nick's addiction. In 2015, Rob Reiner told the Los Angeles Times that he regretted not listening to his son, who said a drug treatment program was not working for him. We were desperate, and because the people had diplomas on their wall, we listened to them when we should have been listening to our son, Rob Reiner had said. That sentiment resonated with Kathy Strain of Berks County, Pennsylvania, who became the legal guardian of her nephew, Tommy, and had considered him a son. She lost him to an opioid overdose in 2018 when he was 27. He died in his recovery home, which Ms. Strain said did not have Narcan, the medication that can reverse an opioid overdose. Ms. Strain now leads support programs at Partnership to End Addiction, one of the nation's largest nonprofit groups dedicated to helping families dealing with substance use. She said Nick Reiner's history spotlights a need to improve mental health and addiction treatment centers and to provide ongoing services after patients leave rehab. She has two adult children who are also recovering from substance use and said she has often felt judged for their struggles. Many people have told her that the only way her children would get better was to let them hit rock bottom, a sentiment she disagreed with. We're often told they're choosing this. This is why they want, Ms. Strain said. But addiction is a disease. Ms. Vargas's daughter, Rebecca Much, in 4 years into recovery, or is 4 years into recovery, as someone who grew up in the California suburbs with a loving family, Ms. Much said she never expected to be someone who was overwhelmed by addiction. She remembered that while she was struggling, she would constantly wonder, why am I doing this? How did I find myself in this situation? Shame and guilt mounted as she watched her inability to stop using affected her family, she said. Those feelings kept her out of recovery for years. She imagined that someone with Nick Reiner's history could have felt similar. He had so many opportunities and so many things that were available to him and didn't have to worry for much or want for much, Ms. Much said, but still had that dependency that he couldn't exactly explain. It takes you into some pretty dark places, she added. Okay, next article, and this is from the opinions section, an article by Nicholas Kristof. Let's go beyond Trump's vile words about Rob Reiner. After Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were stabbed to death, President Trump went off on social media, on a social media tear, denouncing Rob Reiner for supposedly having a mind crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. Asked about the comment, Trump doubled down, saying that Reiner was a deranged person who was very bad for our country. Trump seemed to blame Reiner for his own murder, saying that he drove people crazy and reportedly died due to the anger he caused. If that was meant as a reference to the arrest of Reiner's son, Nick, in connection with the killing, Laura Loomer, Trump's far right ally, made this explicit. She said of Rob Reiner, naturally, his son was also a loser, and he got addicted to drugs and allegedly murdered his parents. All this is so vile and graceless in the face of what may be the worst kind of family tragedy, uh, uh, patriarchide and matricide. We yearn for leaders to unite us, to help us heal after tragedies, to offer a moral vision as well as a political agenda. Instead, Trump once again magnifies hatred and divisions in the crassless way. He seems to exult in cruelty. So, by all means, let's condemn the president's dehumanizing language about the Reiners. But I hope we can also go a step further and work to reduce such tragedies. Nick Reiner has struggled with addiction since he was a teenager. Our metric for addiction tends to be overdose death, more than 80,000 in the United States in 2024. But the toll is far higher. It's found in the ache in so many homes, among parents bewildered by a child's self destructiveness as they toss about all night, wondering what they did wrong. As they worry that the jangle of the phone will report an overdose, as they try to comprehend a descent into homelessness, prostitution, or violence, as they fear for a child sometimes evolves into fear of a child. Addiction carves a vast river of pain through America. That seems to have been the story of the Reiners. We were desperate, Rob Reiner once said of their efforts to help their son, who first went into rehab at about 15 and estimated, that he had been through 18 bouts of rehab while still a teenager. One can only imagine the Reiners' anguish as they saw him become homeless and repeatedly relapse. Addiction shadowed the Reiners' home and also Joe Biden's, but mostly it haunts the powerless and invisible who often can't get adequate help, and perhaps partly because it is so stigmatized. It doesn't get the attention or remedies that are needed. Trump has also shown has shown periodic interest in the toll of drugs in America and is spending millions of dollars on a vast military deployment in the Caribbean on the supposed basis that Venezuela is shipping fentanyl to the United States. In fact, Venezuela ships mostly cocaine, not fentanyl, and the drugs go mostly to Europe rather than America. If Trump's anti drug efforts were serious rather than performative, he would be expanding Medicaid and other initiatives that support treatment for people who use them. It should be a national scandal that fewer than one fifth of Americans who need treatment for substance use disorder get it. I've written about the best drug treatment program I know of, called Women in Recovery in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It should be scaled up for men and women alike across the country. Treatment is imperfect, as Nick Reiner's journey shows, for his family had resources to get him help but struggled to tug him from the vortex of drugs. I've also known many people whose lives were saved by treatment. Two of those were people who I think were capable of murder when they were high and strung out. Seriousness about addiction would also entail addressing the underlying causes that lead people to self medicate with drugs. That means starting with young children and addressing traumas, getting kids through school and on a path to college or a trade. Why am I so passionate about this issue? Because my hometown is rural Oregon. Saw in rural Oregon, saw factories and sawmills close and meth arrive. And so many families have been bathed in pain since. By this year, one third of the kids who rode with me on the number 6 school bus in Yamhill, Oregon, are gone from drugs, alcohol, or suicide. Two died on the streets while homeless. Several committed brutal crimes. One neighbor regularly let her drug dealer rape her seventh grade daughter in exchange for meth. After I wrote books about this neglected uh, uh, situation of suffering, strangers would approach me and confide in whispers that their son was homeless or their daughter was in prison. This is a national trauma, and we Americans have never adequately confronted it. If you're looking for a way to step up, here's another idea. Every year, I have a holiday giving guide recommending several nonprofits that I deeply admire for their effectiveness. This year, on one of the nonprofits I recommend is Vision to Learn. working here in the United States to get glasses in the hands of lower income children so they can see, do schoolwork, and succeed. Without glasses, they too often become disruptive troublemakers on a downhill trajectory. Studies find that glasses make an enormous difference in outcomes. Getting kids glasses is not going to end the scourge of drugs in America, but it can transform the lives of some young children. It represents lighting a candle rather than cursing the darkness. If you want to join our effort, you can donate to christophImpact.org, and all contributions will be matched. Or there are other ways to step up, for there are thousands of good organizations building opportunity and trying to push back at the indifference. That feels far more constructive, even presidential, than heaping scorn on the grave of a murdered couple who, for all their fame and achievement, were just heartsick mom and dad. Okay, next article, another article from the opinion section. What happens when you send a girl to school? Joyce Arthur was born in rural Ghana, the eldest daughter in a family of 5 children. Her family slept in a single room, and their daily income earned by catching and selling fish wasn't enough for everyone to eat 3 meals a day. Like many girls in her community, she knew that she would probably be married off early or get pregnant as a teenager or both. Education would not be an option. Ms. Arthur knew she wanted more for her life. I saw a future that was beyond what my community and my family were showing me, she said. I knew the only way was to go to school. One day, while she was cooking with her mother, she shared her dream of attending school. Her mother was initially incredulous. No girl in her family had ever gone to school, but agreed to let her attend elementary school and junior high, which were free. From there, Ms. Arthur resolved she would find a way to pay for high school, college, and beyond. Ms. Arthur understood that she would have to excel to prove the value of educating a daughter. I was very disciplined, she said. Even when I was hungry, I would still go to school on an empty stomach. In the afternoon, she would return home and help her mother shell, sell smoked fish. She sometimes woke up at 2 a.m. to begin studying. One of Miss Arthur's teachers noticed her ambition and pulled her aside one day to tell her about the Campaign for Female Education, a nonprofit that pays for girls' education in rural Africa and supports them with mentorship. CamFeds helped allow her to attend high school, where she thrived, especially in her math courses. When she graduated, CamFed sponsored her to attend college as well. CamFed has supported over 650,000 girls with scholarships to attend high school, which typically costs money to attend in Africa. CamFed's alumni network has supported an additional 1.7 million students, with each graduate paying for the school costs of 3 children on average. Ms. Arthur sponsors 9, plus her 3 younger sisters, who she said otherwise would never have stepped into a classroom. Today, Ms. Arthur is continuing her own education, working toward a master's degree in international education policy. She also runs Araba Foundation International, which provides menstrual health products, education, and mentorship to girls in Ghana. Next, she said, she'll earn a PhD, expand her foundation, and start businesses in Ghana. I'm still putting the plans together, she said. I am a living testimony, Ms. Arthur said, to the possibility of when you invest in a girl. Okay, next article. Interest rate cut and slower inflation offer Britons a reprieve. Britain's central bank reduced interest rates to 3.75%, a move that was welcomed by the government, which has been looking to lower the high cost of living. The British economy ended the year with a moment of respite. Policymakers at the Bank of England cut interest rates on Thursday a quarter of percent to 3.75% after inflation slowed more than economists had predicted. The central bank held rates steady at its two previous meetings because of concerns about stubbornly high inflation. Data published on Wednesday erased those fears, in particular for Andrew Bailey, the governor of the bank. Consumer price rose 3.2% in November versus the same time last year, down from 3.6% the previous month. We've passed the recent peak in inflation and it has continued to fall. So we have cut interest rates for the sixth time in the past year and a half, Mr. Bailey said in a statement. For months, the nine-person rate setting committee at the Bank of England has been almost equally divided into two camps. One group has been concerned about weakening demand in the economy and troubled by signals of low confidence, such as households' high saving rates. The other group has been worried that the recent bout of high inflation has changed the way households and businesses think about prices, potentially embedding higher inflationary expectations in their behavior. Mr. Bailey has served as the swing vote recently. This week, he broke the deadlock again, cast one of the 5 votes in favor of cutting rates, versus 4 for leaving them unchanged. We still think rates are on a gradual path downward, Mr. Bailey had said. But with every cut we make, how much further we go down becomes a closer call. Policymakers said inflation would fall faster than expected in the short term because relatively high interest rates have been restricting the economy. Growth has been subdued, and the labor market was loosening. The unemployment rate recently climbed to 5.1%, the highest level in 5 years. The rate cut was welcomed by the government, which has said it wanted to help reduce inflation and is aware that households are struggling because of the high cost of living. In her annual budget last month, Rachel Reeves, the chancellor of the Excelsior, said she would cut household energy bills and freeze rail fares. On Thursday, Ms. Reeves called the rate cut good news for mortgage holders and businesses with loans. But I know there's more to do to help families with the cost of living, she added in a statement. Many economists see the British economy's outlook as middling. Inflation is not expected to return to the bank's 2% target until 2027. This year, economic growth has been heavily supported by public spending, but private investment and consumer spending has been lackluster. If that dynamic continues next year, the British economy may muddle through but remain vulnerable to shocks. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development recently forecast Britain's economy to grow 1.2% next year, down from 1.4% this year. Last year, the government raised taxes, particularly on businesses, and this year said it would take steps to raise more money from income taxes. Increased government spending is also set to moderate. The government, led by the Labour Party, has struggled to cement a positive narrative about the economy. This week, it announced that a workers' rights bill would soon become law and that the country had reached a trade deal with South Korea. But economists are watching for other policies targeting areas such as faster home building and development of infrastructure projects. Okay, next short article. Truth Social parent to emerge with nuclear fusion firm and $6 billion deal. The deal would be a total transformation for Trump Media and Technology Group, the social media and crypto company in which President Trump holds a large stake. President Trump's social media company, which recently expanded into streaming and cryptocurrency, is now looking to become a fusion power company. Trump Media and Technology Group and TAE Technologies, a fusion power company, said Thursday that they had agreed to an all stock merger valued at more than $6 billion. The deal would be total transformation for Trump Media, the struggling parent company to Truth Social, the social media platform that has struggled to gain market share beyond serving as the main online megaphone for President Trump. Trump's media's stock has been flagging, having fallen some 70% this year before the merger was announced. The announcement provided a jolt to Trump's media shares, which rose 25% in pre-market trading. President Trump is the company's largest shareholder, owning just over a 50% stake. His shares are held in a trust managed by his eldest son, Don Jr., who is a Trump Media Board member. Mr. Trump did not immediately comment on the deal on Truth Social. The merger would create one of the world's first publicly traded nuclear fusion companies, according to a news release from the companies. TAE Technologies, according to a company news release, has received financial backing from Google, Chevron, and Goldman Sachs, among others. Some tech companies are looking at fusion, still experimental technology, as a clean energy alternative that could help provide the enormous amounts of electricity needed by AI data centers. The deal is likely to draw scrutiny, as it would indirectly put a company owned by Mr. Trump in competition with other firms looking to power and profit from the AI revolution. Okay, last article. U.S. military announces 4 killed in 26th boat strike. The attack on Wednesday brings the total number of killed to at least 99 since the Trump administration began bombing boats suspected of ferrying drugs in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. The U.S. military announced on Wednesday that it had struck a boat earlier in the day that it suspected of ferrying drugs in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people. In a post on social media, U.S. Southern Command said that the strike conducted at the direction of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had targeted a boat sailing along a known narcotic trafficking route, and that 4 male narco-terrorists had been killed in the attack. The New York Times could not immediately verify the strike or the intelligence cited by the military. The strike, the 26th announced by the U.S. military, brings the total number killed to at least 99 since the Trump administration began bombing boats in September. The attacks have drawn an ire of legal experts and many members of Congress who contend that the strikes amount to uh, extrajudicial killings and potentially war crimes. The boat strike on Wednesday is the latest in a ratcheting escalation between the United States and Venezuela. The United States has amassed thousands of troops and dozens of warships in the Caribbean Sea. In recent days, it announced a blockade aimed at Venezuela's oil industry. Venezuela ordered its navy to escort oil tankers coming from its ports. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Your reader today has been Mark Ryer. Thank you so much for listening.